So many of us have heard the term imago Dei, image of God. What does it mean to be created in the image of God? My name is Dan. I'm with Ben. We're the teaching pastors at Life Fellowship in metropolitan Charlotte, North Carolina. Ben, this is an important topic and kind of a baseline topic. When we understand what it means to be created in the image of God and all that that encompasses, it sets some philosophical foundational standards and also some barriers for where we should be willing to go, particularly as it relates to things that are very heavy on our future, like AI, transhumanism, and some of the other things we're going to be discussing in episodes to come. So we thought it'd be a good idea to start here, right?
I think, we had two previous conversations on AI, and I think one of the things that we discussed was this whole idea of just because we can doesn't mean we should. And for us as Christians, our worldview towards technology should always be: is this going to help produce something good, true, and beautiful in our world? The other question is this inhibiting on the image of God in humanity? Right, like that's really important. And I think we can say that, and I think a lot of people might hear. I mean, when people talk about computers taking over humanity, and you remember the movies, The Matrix, the Matrix trilogy, and I think out of the three, the first one's the only one worth watching. But
there's four.
Oh, that's right, there's four now. I didn't even watch it.
I watched it. It wasn't worth it.
Okay, so
don't put yourself through it.
But the whole idea, it's machines against humanity, and there's this cosmic conflict between, will humanity rise up against the machines? And so I think there's this fear today that with this advent of AI, and oh my goodness, look what it's able to do, and it will supplant humans. And I think that we have to take a step back and remember, I sit here today, I believe that there's going to be certain jobs, occupations that will change, but I don't believe we'll ever get to the point where machines will become self-actualized. I just don't believe that, because there's something about humanity that is greater than that we are the reflection of God's image. There's something unique in us that no machine can ever do. And like we said, I can't remember how many episodes ago, the reason why it says artificial intelligence, because it's artificial. Not many people process faster, but there's everything that we know about AI, there's a gatekeeper at the top of the chain that's feeding it the information, or the kind of information that it's sharing with it. So it's only producing that which it has been information it's been fed. It cannot actually come up with something new that it hasn't. That's the framework of information that's outside of it. Does that make sense?
It does. It raises a lot of other questions that are probably far too deep to go here, because you can go into an infinite loop of down to who came first.
The chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
Did you ask ChatGPT what came first, the chicken or the egg?
No, I have never done it.
Britt, do that real quick while we're live searching right now. But I believe why the image of God, the doctrine of the image of God, is so vital, because it's foundational to our understanding of humanity. And a lot of the technology that's happening is going to infringe upon what does it mean to be human today.
Yeah. And it goes back to, the very first words of Scripture was, in the beginning, God.
That's right.
And if you're going to have a biblical worldview, a Christian worldview, you have to start with this idea that there was God before anything else, and that's what matters most. And we ought to pursue him and search for him and understand our role in a universe created by him.
Okay. That's beautiful, but I just got the answer to the chicken or the egg.
If I ask you to quote back what I just said, you couldn't do it, could you?
Guys, there's no way.
You were reading.
Okay. So
it was brilliant, by the way.
Whatever Dan said, quote that, tweet it, whatever you want to do. But the real reason why we're listening today is to figure out, what does ChatGPT believe about the chicken or the egg, which came first, and this is its response. Ready?
I am breathless.
The question of which came first, the chicken or the egg, is an age-old philosophical conundrum. From a biological perspective, eggs existed long before chickens evolved. The first chickens would have hatched from eggs laid by pre-chicken ancestors. So in that sense, the egg came first. I don't think...
Which flies in the face
of biblical creationism.
ChatGPT, you're wrong.
So, but really, God created chickens first then.
That's
if
what
you think about
from
it.
A biblical worldview.
Yeah. Oh, so we've got to see. This is why we listen. This is why we do this show, so you will know that ChatGPT is not infallible.
Yes.
So, okay.
But Ben and Dan are.
Yes, we are. Okay, so image of God. This is, I got a lot of my information out from a theological textbook called Systematic Theology by Wayne Grudem. And Wayne Grudem is, brilliant theologian, but basically he's, we get this idea of the image of God in Genesis 1:26 when God says, "Let us make man in our own image and likeness." So those two words, image and likeness, are Hebrew words that, the idea of likeness means something similar, something that's just like it. And then the word image is this idea of something that represents something. So man is like God and represents God in a unique way above and beyond all other creative things in the world. That's how I would describe it. So what does it mean to have the image of God? It means this idea that we reflect God on this creation in many ways, and we represent him. He's asked us to represent him in this creation. So that's what it is in a nutshell, but I think it requires some further conversation. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, and one of the other people who have weighed in on this is William Lane Craig, the great apologist, and he dealt with 3 areas of Imago Dei, and you just mentioned 2 of them: the resemblance view, in that we were created to resemble him, and the representative view, we were created to represent him. The third area that definition from Grudem doesn't seem to hit on that much is the relational view, and that God very specifically created a relationship between him and mankind.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, and it is through that Imago Dei that we can have a relationship at all.
Yeah.
Whereas perhaps, at least in its fullness, you don't have a relationship with trees or whatever.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
back and forth.
Right.
So, but yeah.
So here's what I think. What does it look like? How is it expressed? Because if you go back to Darwinism, I believe that the predominant view that most people have today is that we are just if we're going to take the evolutionary, naturalistic, biological view of humanity, we have evolved. We're just higher forms of animals, right? The biblical view says that no, we are the representatives, and with the image of God, there's something unique. When God created mankind, there was something special about us. And so what distinguishes us between humans and the animals? We may be mammals, but there's something unique about us. And so I believe there's 4 major reasons, and I think you mentioned some of them there. The first one is moral aspects, that we have this idea of we can understand right and wrong. We can understand this idea of things that, a dog might be trained to know what's right and wrong, but he has no conscience in and of himself of like, oh my goodness, what did I do?
Yeah, because they have no self-awareness.
They have no self-awareness, right? So this idea of this moral, we have this conscience, and even God in Romans chapter 2 talks about that the law is written on our hearts. So God's created us with this sense of right and wrong. That's first. Number 2, and you mentioned that with the relational view, but there's a spiritual aspect. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead. There's a spiritual aspect to us, that we are not purely a clump of cells, that we're body, soul, and spirit. There's both a material and an immaterial part to us. Just like God is spirit, when the Bible explains how God created us, it says that He breathed His Spirit, the breath of God, into us. And so there's this idea of we have this immaterial part of us that when the body dies, the spirit goes somewhere. And one day there will be a resurrection where body and spirit come together. So this idea, the image of God, also not just our moral senses and our conscience, but also that there is an immaterial part to us, okay? Number 3, that there's mental aspects. We actually have this mental capacity to think logically, to debate, to philosophize. I mean, someone said, I forget, I think Grudem said, dogs will never write about the philosophy of what it means to be a dog. They don't. Animals are programmed. They don't think outside of themselves, right? And so we can philosophize. What does it mean to be human? We're writing books and libraries on these things, but the other animal world, the insect world, they're not doing these kinds of things. They might show some level of mental aptitude, but they're not showing this kind of depth. The idea of language, the idea of awareness of time, the idea of emotions, the things that we can dream about things in the future. We can have regrets about the past. These are all reflections of, we think at a level, and emote at a level that's so different than the animal kingdom. And I think the last best description of mental aspects is this creativity. We create art, we create music, we create literature, sports, cooking, science, technology. These are all things that reflect this idea of God as creator, and now we are creating. And so here's where that taps into the AI thing, is now all the creative energy or the ideas can be, we can use AI now to create things. So what does that do now to our ability to create? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are some questions that we have to ask ourselves. Is, I think the danger of AI is that if it diminishes the image of God that we have inside of us, and all of a sudden we just stop creating and we start just letting computer programs do this work, we're in a world of hurt. Yeah. That's my thought. Those are my opinions.
Yeah, and we lose control of those when we assign it to algorithms, and when we assign it to programmatic predispositions or pre-assertions that it takes away choice.
Yes.
It takes away, and in many ways, one of the dangerous things, and we'll talk about this in a future episode, is that it eliminates some of the biodiversity that God created, that makes the world infinitely interesting.
Yes.
And it relegates it to ones and zeros, or it relegates it to predetermined issues. And so, part of the wonder of God is His infinite nature.
Yes.
And we can't even comprehend that because we're finite.
That's right.
But when you really look into some of these things, there are some things about God that He kept to Himself and did not share.
That's right.
With His creation.
That's right.
And His immutability, His perfection, His ability to see things simultaneously, past, present, future, all of those things. So He has given us enough that He enjoys us and we enjoy Him, but He has not given us everything.
That's right. Yeah, and I think when you think about that in terms of AI, the things that we just talked about, number one, just like God created us with limitations, that we are expressing the image of God in some level, not perfectly. I mean, we can never fully perfectly, but because God is God. But when we're creating AI, we're creating something in our own image, but really there's limitations, right? Like, for example, I don't believe that you can create an artificial intelligence machine, computer, operating system, whatever it is, that really understands morality. Now, you can program morality, but there's no freedom to choose morality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's one of the great dangers of it.
Yes.
Because there is an absence of morality without intentional morality.
Yeah, there's an absence, or there's a puppet master of morality.
Yeah, somebody has to define what morality is.
Someone that's feeding the algorithms and the computer, the zeros and the ones, is determining what is moral and what isn't moral.
And to get there, you have to dismantle some aspects of morality.
Yes.
Because once you get into that, then you got to start thinking about realities like eugenics. Who's worthy of life?
Yes.
And who's worthy of the consumption of certain resources.
Yes. And that's why I think for us, this doctrine of the image of God is so vitally important, because if we just simply live in a horizontal world of ones and zeros and cells and biology, we forget the supernatural aspects of our world, and we forget there is an objective standard of truth. There's an objective authority that's above all of us, that we are not God. And we're supposed to actually represent Him. And the further we get away from becoming like Him or representing Him, the more danger we're going to fall into as humanity.
Yeah, and I think part of this, looking at the humanity aspect of it, is what is what was God's purpose in creating mankind,
Mm.
and what is the purpose of our existence? Well, I mean, if you want to go to the Westminster Confession or whatever, our purpose should be
That's right.
to glorify God.
Absolutely.
But if we are nothing but ones and zeros,
Mm.
if there is no after,
Mhm.
if everything is natural,
Mm.
then what is the purpose of our creation? To get to the next level? Well, there is no next level for
That's
us.
right.
There's just somebody that follows us that goes to the next level.
I mean, Paul said, if there's no resurrection, eat and drink, for tomorrow you die.
Yeah.
Just enjoy life as much as you can.
Yeah, I was having a intense conversation with some atheists one time, and I wanted to shock them, and I did. Oh, they got outraged when I said this. I said, but if I really believed what you guys claim to believe, I would immediately, first of all, I got a list of people I don't like. I'm gonna go murder them. And I've got a lot of food that I'm not supposed to eat. I'm gonna go eat that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of beautiful women in the world I'd like to pursue, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna go there.
Yeah.
All kinds of, and I just listed all these heinous,
Right.
selfish things. And they said, "What kind of monster are you?" And I said, "No, I'm not a monster. I'm logical.
Yeah.
If there is no tomorrow, if there's no right or wrong, if there's no up or down, if there's no forever after, if there are no consequences, why wouldn't I live in this pure moment of absolute hedonism?"
Right. And even the fact that he said, well, what kind of monster? You have no right to tell me that I'm
Exactly.
because what I'm doing is there's no morals.
Yeah.
There's no moral absolutes.
And who says your morals are better than my morals?
Exactly.
Yeah. So this and this is the fundamental breakdown of worldviews
Mm.
that I always point back to. There's no real multiplicity of worldviews. There are two worldviews. There's a God and he matters, or there isn't.
That's right.
And it's just that simple.
100%.
It goes right back to the Garden of Eden. Either
Yeah.
you trust God or you don't.
Yeah.
Either he exists or it doesn't matter.
Mm.
And when you get to that, that base, that's the one and the zero. It really is. It's the essence of philosophy.
Exactly. That's so good. I think it's important. I want to just mention this about the image of God before. I know we got a few minutes left. I think it's important to understand the image of God in the redemptive history. And so what I think we need to understand is everything we explained about what the image of God is, it's fully expressed. It was enjoyed in completely before the fall, but once the fall happened, the image of God became distorted. And I think it's what you see, and we talked a little about this in the book of Daniel. You see this also in the book of Revelation, that once the fall happened, mankind now has the ability to either become more like God, to go towards the image of God, or go towards the animal world. We will either become more animalistic in our behaviors, in our reflection, or now we have the chance to be restored. And so the fall distorted the image. It didn't erase it; it just distorted it. So now we can go one of two ways. We can be more animal-like or more God-like. What Christ did is he recovered God's image in us, so that when we are, the Bible talks about us being, a new creation in Christ, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, that he makes all things new. Like there's this idea of God restoring, or I should say recovering the image of God, that now we are I think it's 2 Corinthians chapter 4, that we are being transformed into his image, from one degree of glory to the next. That's this idea of this recovery process. And it's not until the actual resurrection that when Jesus returns, that complete restoration in God's image will be present. That we will no longer struggle with this, the struggle of the flesh, or the struggle of, living by our animalistic urges, but to say, no, I live according to 100%. I'm like God in the way I think, the way I act, the way I feel. Everything is a complete reflection of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, here's where the problem comes with that, because that is actually the goal of transhumanism, which we'll talk about in our next episode. But they don't look at it in the spiritual domain at all. Not in its origin, not in its consequence, and not in its restoration. And so the notion that science itself, naturalism, looks at the second law of thermodynamics. It looks at these realities, and it's why we spend so much time wanting to look younger, live longer, live better. Well, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with the marring effect of original sin, and God said, "I'll take care of that for you.
That's right.
I will restore you.
Yes,
if you believe." And man says we don't want to believe, but we want to be restored.
Yeah. We're looking for what only God can give to us, but we want to find the answers ourselves. And isn't that that goes all the way back to Eden?
It's the epitome of man's fallen nature.
Yeah. I want what God can give me, but I want it for myself.
Yeah.
I think these are all issues that are pertinent to AI. So as we talk about technology, as we talk next episode, I think this leads into the transhumanism, because you can't talk about AI without talking about transhumanism, because this idea, this pursuit of faster processing, greater creative means, how can we now merge what we're doing on the technological side with the biological side and the problems of who we are as humans?
Yep.
And that's what we're going to talk about in our next episodes.
Yes, and if you fully want to understand what Imago Dei means, and if you want to understand what it means to be created in the image of God, you're going to have to know God. You're going to have to meet God.
Right.
You're going to have to learn about Him, and that begins with Scripture. And if you really want to know why you exist and where you're heading and why you matter at all to anything in this universe, you need to read your Bible. And it begins with that. And then once you understand that, once you know your Creator, everything else begins to fall in place. So this has been a great start to this conversation. We're going to continue it as we look at another facet of what it means to be in the image of God and man's headlong pursuit away from God. And we'll be looking at that next time on Life Talks. But as always, thanks for joining us. We hope you'll share us with your friends. And until next time, thank you for joining us as always at Life Talks.